So here the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, is encouraging all sentient beings, all those in the assembly, to make a vow to reborn in the Western Pure Land. So that's today's topic is about vow power or will power. And what I want to discuss today with you, how to develop our vow power to overcome our karmic forces or karmic momentum, because that's the only way that we can achieve spiritual liberation. And to understand the obstructions of the karmic forces, what are the forces that keep us within the realm of the samsara, the cycle of life and death, that we cannot achieve spiritual liberation. And thirdly, to develop spiritual and mental positivity, because that's the only way that we can generate our willpower and can maintain it to overcome the karmic forces and provide the seed of joyful faith, right? 志心信乐信要鸡当真鸟 the fertile ground for that seed to grow. And then why do people struggle with maintaining their willpower? And why can't Buddhas and Bodhisattvas just create a happy land for us to be in? And why is it so difficult? So we can see that we just read that in the Amida Sutra, the Buddha, here Shakyamuni Buddha, encourages the entire assembly, and that includes us, to make a vow for rebirth in Sukhavati, right? 极乐世界, cực lạc thế giới. To help understand that, we need to understand the differences between willpower and karmic power, karmic forces. So what is willpower? What is vow power? Willpower is initiated, is self-initiated, self-motivation. And for example, the will to go anywhere, to be anywhere, that's willpower. Like for example, you want to be in class today, that's willpower, right? You have made a conscious effort to choose to do something. That's willpower. Nobody's controlling you, nobody's telling you, but you have decided to do such and such. So that is willpower. Whereas karmic momentum or karmic forces, karma is restrictions. It's an obligation to do something. You know that you are under karmic forces when you have grudges and you don't want to do certain things, but you have to. You're being pushed to do something that you don't want to. You feel obligated. So that's karma. And again, willpower is freedom, it's liberation, it's your own choice that you get to decide to do what you want to do. Of course, the ultimate freedom here is to achieve physical and spiritual freedom. And the ultimate really here is the liberation from the cycle of life and death. And the Buddha has achieved complete spiritual freedom, including physical freedom. Here, when I say spiritual freedom, I don't mean to spiritual freedom from the cycle of life and death. I don't mean to escape to some paradise and to be away from all the troubles, but really to be without fear, without restrictions, without afflictions, in anywhere and anywhere that we want to be. So that is freedom. It's not to be in a certain place hoping that you feel free, but to be anywhere, feel free without fear. Because the Buddha has shown us that 3,000 years ago that he had achieved spiritual freedom. As time progresses, fewer and fewer people can achieve spiritual freedom from the samsara. And we can practice meditation and we can achieve some level of meditation, but it's not easy to achieve liberation. And it is even more difficult for the worldly people. Right? The worldly people, they continuously living and dying in that continuous cycle. And it's normal for them. To them, that's normal. And to them, there's no opportunity to be liberated. Right? After this life, they're getting prepared for next life. satisfaction, dissatisfaction in the next life, and suffering in the subsequent life, and continue to face death. So birth, suffering, death, over and over again. For normal people, that is the cycle that they go through, and they don't expect anything more. But for Buddhists, we know that there are better alternatives, and we have a better chance for liberation. For Buddhist practitioners, especially Pure Land practitioners, we have even a better chance for liberation with a migration to Sukhavati, 极乐世界, right? So we have a better chance when we make a vow for rebirth to the Western Pure Land, because we know that it is very difficult to achieve liberation in this lifetime. Even with meditation, you need to have some form of meditation, and it's already difficult to achieve a level of meditation. And so we know that the most probable alternative is for migration to Sukhavati. Of course, this is not easy because of the strong karmic forces that create obstructions for us to go there. And this karmic momentum comes about because of the living without awareness. We react to the data that our sensors receive, and we react to the data. So that's living without awareness. And that continues to increase that habit. And we forever continue to emotionally react to the data that we receive. And what happens is that we continue to push that wheel of cycle of life and death. But if we understand this and we have awareness, we can cause rise to our own willpower. Then can we start changing the direction? In other words, we start to slowly reduce the momentum of this will. We start to change its directions, or at least slow down its momentum, its speed. And when we can migrate to Sukhavati, then we are bringing that will of life and death to a complete stop. So why do we have karmic forces that keep us within the realm of reincarnation? The primary reason for reincarnation is because there is attachment within us to the ego, 自我, right? 我执, right? Self-attachment. And it's not easy to detect where that ego is, because it is invisible to us and invisible to our senses, because the ego has consumed us. And it's invisible, and that's why it's so difficult to see it, to attack it, to overcome it, because you don't know where it resides. In fact, it resides everywhere for us. The ego is hidden in our unskillful deeds. It's hidden in our skillful deeds. It's hidden in our enjoyment, our suffering, our wandering thoughts, and even within our meditative bliss, in the absence of thoughts. For example, in our unskillful deeds, that's easy to be seen, right? The jealousy, anger, there is egoistic drive, and so it's hidden in there. And for skillful deeds, it's that our ego is also behind our skillful deeds as well. 善业, right? 体业. And that is to, when we make contributions, when we help others, there is a hidden wish for fame, fortune, and position of power. And we're hoping to reap the karmic rewards. And so even in our skillful deeds, there's the ego behind pushing us. And enjoyment, of course, this egoistic satisfaction, right? Carefree indulgence. There is an egoistic drive. So there's ego hidden behind that enjoyment. And then for suffering, there are people who like to stay in suffering, even with encouragement to get out of suffering. They don't want to be out of their suffering. They want to remain a victim. Why? Because of the ego. Because they want justify their anger and their hatred, right? They want to maintain as victims in order to justify their behavior. In other words, they're calling for attention. And in wandering thoughts, our wandering thoughts are involuntary, discursive thoughts, 妄想, right? These are thoughts that go, continue to jump from one thought to another and cannot be focused. And all these wandering thoughts are looking for a way to satisfy the egoistic search. And these things are inhibiting our freedom, our wisdom. It's similar to the absence of thoughts, where a person is drowning in meditative joy, and it's inhibiting his or her wisdom. So when there is ego present, hidden on all the things that we do, it inhibits our wisdom from flowering. Of course, this doesn't mean that we should avoid everything in order to remove the ego. We should, at least before we achieve enlightenment, we should first practice skillfulness and positivity, and to avoid unskillfulness and negativity. So even though there is the ego that's hidden in our skillful deeds, our enjoyment, and the absence of thoughts, and the meditative joy, but it doesn't mean we should avoid them. We should at least try to master our skillful deeds. So the very basic that we should learn is at least to be skillful and positive. And so I want to make a point that I'm bringing this up just for your awareness and not to encourage you to avoid all skillful deeds in order to avoid the ego. So given that the ego is behind the pushing of this wheel of cycle of life and death, what can we do to slow it down? What can we do to slow down this wheel of the samsara, of the cycle of life and death? One is to give up wrong views about Buddhism. Right? When we worship the Buddha, we don't see the Buddha as a god. When we pray to the Buddha, we don't pray like we pray to the Buddha as a god. Right? The Buddha was a human being, an extraordinary human being who gained enlightenment by his own efforts. So he set examples for us to follow. Not just an example, but he did it. So he was leading by example. And so we too can achieve enlightenment if we put in our own efforts. Everything that happens to us is due to a past karma. This is wrong thinking. So we should give up this wrong thinking, that everything happens to us is because of our past karma. Karma is just one aspect of the influence, right? Our present being consists of our past karma. So we're not ignoring our past karma, and we're not taking it to be totality, but our current present consists of our past karma, our current karma, the things that we do, words that we say, the thoughts that we think, and our environments. All those things shape our current presence. And the second thing that we can do to slow down this wheel of life and death is to live with awareness, right? Through our conscious efforts to grow and to develop our individuality. So a person who is an individual is a person who is responsible, who's moral, and moving towards higher levels of consciousness and meditativeness and wisdom. So that's an individual. So a person who lives without awareness is a unit in a mass, and not moving towards higher level of consciousness. In living with awareness, we should avoid being egoistical and emotionally reactive. Right? We're living according to our innate nature of greed, anger, and delusion, without any kind of willpower. So we just go with the flow. We continue to push that wheel of cycle of life and death, and we're not slowing it down. But when we live with awareness, and we have willpower to change the direction, then we are slowing down that speed, the will of cycle of life and death. So living without awareness is egoistically driven. For example, in the position of power, that person is trapped in indulgence and becomes wasteful and in slavish spending. And in the position of power, he is susceptible to arrogance and abuse. So he has no guiding principles for living meaningful life. Or in the state of poverty, he becomes even more stingy and selfish, right? Hoarding as much as possible. So that's being reactive. That is not living with awareness. The third that we can do to slow down this will of cycle of life and death is to develop positivity and to provide a fertile ground for the seed of the vow to grow. For example, we can develop metta, loving kindness towards ourselves, right, towards others, and develop dana. Dana is giving, and giving for the sake of Buddhist movement to help it grow strong, to help others benefit from this Buddhist movement. So when we live our lives with awareness and we're practicing the Dharma, we are part of that Buddhist movement. And the third thing that we can do is to practice contentment. That is, not being discontented, but working to improve your own conditions at the same time, not wasting mental energy on being discontented. Right? There are people who just focus on the negativity, on what they don't have, and not appreciative of what they have. By doing that, they are not being contented. And next is to practice speaking the truth. That is slowing down the cycle of life and death, not going along with the stream, but to be an individual, to be responsible, to be moral, to speak the truth. Next is to practice mindfulness, right? Always keeping a clear mind and knowing what you are doing, not doing things in a muddle, right? We understand clearly why we do things, and we don't have remorse. Just like Mr. Chen, last night he said that if we are true Buddhists, we should not have regrets of what we do. So in order to not have regrets in what we do, we have to be clear in what is it that we're doing. The words that we say, surely we don't want to take them back. Because when we want to take them back, we have regrets, we have remorse. Next is to practice to meditate, or to practice Buddhism, in this case, meditation. So meditation is not just for monks and nuns, but for all Buddhists, right, who go for refuge. Next is to study the Dharma. The Dharma can help us to gain understanding to slow down the will of cycle of life and death. It's important that we understand what we're learning, the principles, the Dharma that we learn, because if we don't study, we don't understand. And studying the Dharma as much as we can help us to understand the principles and to have that clarity of the mind of things we do and to overcome doubts. Of course, we should hold study classes such as this and to read the Dharma literature. To create this positivity is to have this ability to work together, right? There is no strength without unity. So all Buddhists are brothers and sisters. So we should work together, help one another, practice the Dharma together and spread the Dharma together, to bring benefits to others. The author here says that as some Buddhists become a little richer and get better jobs, it's very important that they do not separate themselves from Buddhists who have not got such good jobs or who are poor. Buddhists should all remain in contact with one another. We have to give up all divisions. Buddhists should remain united. Because when we are in a spiritual community, we help each other. We may not be perfect, and we will have faulty deeds. But when we're in a spiritual community, we can recognize those faults, and there will be people who will help us to overcome those faults. Okay. The fourth thing that we can do to slow down this cycle of life and death is to avoid mechanical practice of Buddhism. There are, like, for example, there's a phrase that Buddhists chant, Namo Myoho Renki Kyo. So that is the phrase that they chant, but some people don't know what they're chanting, but they just chant along. Or when we go to the Dharma assembly, we just follow along and we don't understand why we are here week after week of doing the Dharma assembly. Or when we recite the three refuges, Sangui, right, Tamui, or the 5 precepts, Panska Sila. Pankas is 5 and Sila is precepts. So there are the 5 precepts that we observe when we take on the 3 refuges. Why are we doing those things? So we're just not following things mechanically, but to understand why is it that we're taking on these endeavors. So it's not good to recite something without understanding what is it that we're doing, right? If we want to be a real Buddhist, if you want to be a real Buddhist, you must understand the practice that you're doing. An example was Dr. Ambedkar. He visited a temple in Southeast Asia, and he wanted to see how a bhikkhu, a monk, gave a lecture. So he set up this room to have a monk come in to give a lecture. And the monk came in and the monk came in and spoke for 2 minutes, and then went away. So Dr. Ambedkar was pretty disappointed because he was just reciting, regurgitating the words in the scriptures, but it was not able to elaborate what it meant. And so the speech was pretty disappointing. We don't want just to mechanically practice the Dharma, and we don't want a religious routine. We should put our hearts into the practice of the Dharma. And that's one way of slowing down this wheel of cycle of life and death. Of course, we should go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And we should not just recite the 3 refuges, but we should feel it in our heart and have devotion with the proper understanding. So when we go to refuge to the Buddha, what is it that we are going refuge for? Are we praying to the Buddha for protection? Right? But of course, we just don't pray to Buddha for protection. But when we pray to the Buddha, it is a reminder that the Buddha was an extraordinary human being who achieved enlightenment on his own effort. Therefore, when we bow down to the Buddha, we are reminded of our potential to become the Buddha, like the Buddha, to become enlightened. So same with the Dharma is to understand the truth, have that awareness in what we do. We understand the principles. When we see the world, we see the truth. And of course, here the Sangha represents purity and unity. Right? We should be united. Okay? So we not just recite, but we feel it in our heart and we practice. And all this is helping us to prepare for the seed of vow for rebirth in Sukhavati, to make it fertile. Because the seeds that we put in, unless we have proper preparation, it may not come to fruition. So that means that we should cultivate good roots, merits, virtues, and mindfulness of the Buddha's virtues. Right? 善根福德因缘, right? 田根福德因缘. So by doing these things, by cultivating good roots, merits, and virtues, and have mindfulness of the Buddha's virtues and merits, we are providing the ground, the fertile ground for the seed to grow. Even if we have this willpower, but if we are not careful, the willpower can regress into karmic momentum. Therefore, we should be watchful of our own behavior. in order to avoid being off balance, being biased towards just faith, right, at the expense of vow, practice, and wisdom. So in other words, we just believe in vow number 18 of Amitabha's, and we don't do anything else to help it grow. So that is off balance. And we're not doing anything effectively to slow down that wheel of cycle of life and death. In other words, we're not enhancing our willpower. When we do not leverage our willpower and we allow a karmic momentum to continue, we can become complacent. And this is when we start putting in the efforts. And complacence slowly weakens our diligence and determination. That will destroy our joyful faith. So there are people who started off the spiritual path on a very good note, but towards the end of the journey, they encounter failure. And the complacence is very dangerous because it's like a virus destroying and weakening our vow from within, right? Unbeknownst to us. So here in the Dhammapada, the Buddha encourages us that he says, one who does not make use of his spiritual opportunities, who, though young and strong, is lazy, weak in aspiration, and inactive, such a person does not find a way to insight. So when we depend on faith, we should balance it with wisdom. So faith is the expression, the positive emotional expression of wisdom. So when we have faith in Amitabha, when we make a vow for rebirth in Sukhavati, we should balance that with wisdom. Okay, so this will help us to prevent from regressing to our karmic momentum. Another thing that we can do is to avoid being controlled by our past karma. Otherwise, we'll continue to be stuck in the cycle of life and death. When we're still in our learning stages and we have not yet spiritual liberation, we should understand that it is due to our past karma inhibiting us. All right, we have built negative momentum that is not allowing us to change direction. So until we attain spiritual liberation or certainty of rebirth in Sukhavati, we should know that we are not free from our karmic control. In other words, we should avoid being emotionally reactive to conditions. We should not let our sad emotions or happy emotions to control us, to push us towards the cycle of life and death, and to avoid being under the influence of a karma. Right? So that is to not be emotionally reactive, is to avoid being under the influence of a karma. Those with wisdom, they have solid understanding of the Dharma and the practice. In other words, how do we know that we have wisdom? Well, when karma comes to push, we push back. We are not accepting the karma controlling us, but we recognize that by raising awareness. And our lives are guided by our willpower and not by karma. And we have control of our emotions, our thoughts, our words, and our actions. For example, in unfavorable situations, we don't complain, we don't blame our sufferings on anybody. And we don't encounter suffering ourselves. We may have pain, but we have no suffering. And in favorable situations, we don't lose our self-control and lose ourselves in indulgence. Right? We maintain awareness. So that's an example of person who has control of their emotions and their deeds, and because of this solid understanding of the Dharma. And without the proper understanding of the principles, there is no wisdom, and therefore we will surrender our control to karma. In other words, wherever that karma pushes us, we will go there. and we will not be able to differentiate between unskillfulness and skillfulness, or emotional and spiritual instability. And so when we are under the influence of karma, there is no emotional and spiritual stability. Only when we are emotionally and spiritually strong can our willpower be strong. So if we want our vow to be strong, we have to be emotionally and spiritually stable. And that is why it is necessary for us to cultivate good roots, merits, and the good conditions, right? By being mindful of Amitabha. So it's not just faith alone, but it has to be substantiated by good roots, merits, and conditions. Otherwise, it's just an empty vow, right? So when we practice good roots, merits, and virtues, we are providing substance to our vow to make it strong. And it is not just an empty vow. So you can see that there's a lot of effort that we need to put in order to provide this fertile ground for the seed of vow to grow. But why is it so difficult that we have to make this vow? And if Amitabha is so almighty, why can't he just simply escort us to go to the Western Pure Land? Well, the Buddha lands can be brought into being by bodhisattvas, right? Buddhas and bodhisattvas have enough merits and virtues to create Buddha lands on their own, and for us to have a spiritual life. But if they create that and they purify the Buddha land for the benefits of all sentient beings, they can certainly do that. But why is it that we're not benefiting from it? We're still encountering difficulties, and it is so difficult to maintain the willpower to overcome our karmic forces. In Mahayana, advanced bodhisattvas are quite capable of purifying or building a Buddha land single-handedly. But what is the use? They can create a Buddha land, but then what is the use? Because they can create a Buddha land and they can give people a glimpse, right? We can enjoy it, but we will not be able to last very long. And they will not be able to keep us there indefinitely. The Buddha land, the happy land that Buddhas and Bodhisattvas create, they cannot keep people there indefinitely. And it's because people are not going to cooperate. They will not feel at home, and they're not ready for it. And that's the reasons why we're struggling to resonate with the Pure Land. And that is because it is very difficult to cooperate. We don't have the preparation. There was an Indian story about a woman who sold fish. She would take her village was far away from the market, and she would take her fish to go to the market to sell the fish. And one time, for some reason, it took her a long time to sell the fish. And if she was to go back home to her village that day, it would be very late for her. So she decided to stay in town. Fortunately, there was a flower shop that was still open, and the owner graciously would allow her to stay overnight and said that she could spend the night in his shop. Indian flowers don't sell cut flowers in bunches like Westerners do, or the Westerner ones do. They sell sweet-smelling garlands and little bunches of sweet-scented flowers for the ladies to put in their hair. So the fish seller was staying in the flower shop overnight, and she was sleeping among all the sweet-smelling flowers, but she tossed and turned and couldn't get to sleep. She couldn't bear the scent of the flowers. They were so sweet and beautiful, so she was not used to the sweet scent. So in the end, what did she do? She got her old fish basket, which of course smells strongly of fish, and she right next to her, right by her nose. And after that, she slept quite soundly. Very much in the same situation, we would not feel, we would feel no less uncomfortable in the Pure Land. It's similar to the lady, that woman, the fish seller, sleeping in the sweet flower shop. We could manage a short visit, a weekend perhaps, a short duration. Eventually, we would want to introduce some equivalent of her smelly old fish basket into the Pure Land, right, with our habits. Right? We like to introduce the distractions that we're used to, the entertainment, the excitement that we like. So we would want to bring along some physical or mental distractions, televisions or whatever it is that we like. And then we would feel more comfortable, more at home. Right? But then, of course, the Pure Land would no longer be Pure Land. So in the Pure Land, where everybody survives on meditative bliss and listening to the Dharma talks, can we handle it? Right? If we're not prepared, if we're not mentally prepared, we will want to introduce something to distract ourselves, to relieve the discomfort. So we will not last very long there. Our minds will not allow us because they're not prepared for that kind of environment. If we want to use, if we are used to distractions and excitement, meditative environment can be very boring and even unbearable. And that's why the Buddhas cannot just simply create a Buddha land. They can create a Buddha land, but we will not want to be there very long. We probably want to visit, but not to be there very long, because our minds are not prepared for that kind of environment. So there was an interview with Elon Musk. You all know Elon Musk, the owner or the CEO of Tesla and SpaceX. Right? He was asked, everybody can see his success. So people like to ask him, what can we do to be successful like you? So that's the question they would normally ask him. And in fact, his first wife, she was to give a public talk, and she also asked him that question, but he said, I will not tell you. And that's what he would tell the audience to that, I would not tell you, because to tell you what exactly you have to do to be this successful, you wouldn't want to be like me, because he had to go through a lot. He said that to go through the building up a company is like eating glass. It's very painful. So for a person of his capability to say that, it's really striking. So for us, if we want to be Buddhas, we want to be in the Pure Land, we cannot just simply have faith and wish and hope that will be there. We have to prepare ourselves. So all the conditions that we encounter, all the difficulties that we encounter, they are not there to make us suffer, but they are there to help us to prepare mentally, right? To have that awareness. Those situations are there to remind us to have this awareness, to slowly mold ourselves to be more and more comfortable, right? To that kind of environment. We want to be comfortable in that kind of environment, we have to be prepared, right? So if we truly want to be in Sukhavati, we should cause rise to make a vow to be there. That's the first step. And then we should spend the rest of our lives preparing for it, right? So it's not just a one day or 2-day kind of activity, but it's a lifetime commitment. And when I say commitment, it shouldn't be very fearful, because if we want happiness, we have to work for it, right? And so we shouldn't be afraid of the hard work. We shouldn't be afraid of difficult situations, but we should take that as an opportunity to prepare ourselves to be used to meditative environments, to be used to living in awareness, right? So what is a bodhisattva to do? Right? He cannot create Pure Land magically for us and keeping us there. The bodhisattva wants us to be in there. And if we want to be there, so we are at least resonating, we are on the same plane. So that means that we have that opportunity to be there, but we have to understand that it's going to take some effort, and we should be courageous enough to put in the efforts. Because otherwise we will get uncomfortable, and it will no longer be a Pure Land. So then what can we do? What is the bodhisattva to do? He cannot just create a Pure Land on his own. I mean, he can, but it will not be of any use because nobody will be there. So what that means is that the Buddha Land has to be a joint creation. Right? It has to be built by a number of people, bodhisattvas and would-be bodhisattvas, right? Together, working. So mundane beings and sages working together to create this Buddha Land. Just like a spiritual community. You can create a spiritual community, but if nobody wants to come here, then it's not going to be a spiritual community. You cannot force people to come. But if people come and there's no spiritual community, then they cannot do that on their own efforts. So we have somebody who is capable to create this environment for us, and we want to be part of it. And therefore, a spiritual community is created. Sukhavati, Jila Sijie, Guglakteye. The West Pure Land is created not for Amitabha only. Right? He has created that for sentient beings. And it's just not that you get a free ride to Sukhavati, but you put in the efforts. So when we go there, we put in the efforts to make it even better. Just like in a spiritual community, we understand the benefits. But when we come to a spiritual community, we should put in our efforts to make it even better, right? Not just to ride along, but to put in the efforts to make it even better for ourselves and for others. So one of them may be more advanced than others, and they help each other to take the final step, right? We may be in our different abilities, but in working towards our vows and putting in efforts, there are Buddhas and Bodhisattvas helping us, and we are all inspired by the same ideal to achieve the perfect enlightenment for the benefits of all beings. So we have this aspiration to go to Sukhavati for the purpose of achieving perfect enlightenment for all sentient beings. They all therefore follow the Bodhisattva path, working together, right? Helping one another and helping sentient beings. So when we are aspired to be like Bodhisattvas in Sukhavati, we should then change our attitude and consciousness to be more like them. So that's the preparation part, is to prepare ourselves mentally and spiritually so that we become acclimated to that environment. So we find joy in helping others, in meditative bliss, in learning the Dharma, and in altruism, selflessness. It's like irrigating the land to lead the water, right? You irrigate the land to lead the water to your desired destination. So when we think about Sukhavati, our hearts should be filled with joyful faith. 自心信要, right? 积tâm tín nhạo. And that will require spiritual and mental positivity. How to mental and spiritual positivity, we will talk about that, and it's important because without positivity, there is no joyful faith. Right? When we cause joyful faith, it's a very positive emotion. And so when we practice meditation on wisdom, on compassion, visualization, we are cultivating that positivity in ourselves. So why does Bodhisattva build a Buddha land? So why does the Bodhisattva even bother to build a Buddha land? Well, one straightforward answer is that the Bodhisattva wants to help others by providing them an ideal environment. So the next question is, why should the Bodhisattva be concerned with others at all? Why even bother to make the effort? Is that to answer this question, we have to go a little bit deeper. In other words, the question here is, once we're on our way of cultivation, the question is, should we devote ourselves to our own emancipation, our own liberation, our own spiritual freedom, or to helping others? Right? That's always a struggle. Should I spend my time at home cultivating, meditating for myself, or should I join the spiritual community to help others, to help myself? So that's sometimes, that question may seem very simple, but it's a struggle that everybody will have to go through, because it takes efforts to be in a spiritual community and to be helping others. So this question is crucial to the spiritual life. In the context of Buddhism, it amounts to asking whether we should follow the Arahant ideal, Alohan, or Bodhisattva ideal, Pusa Dao, right? Bồ-Tát Dao. So what should we follow? In its extreme form, an Arahant ideal is to gain emancipation for oneself alone without bothering too much about other people. Like last night we had that discussion where the story about Sariputta in his past life, who was practicing Bodhisattva ideal, and he gave up because it was difficult to help others. He was willing to gouge out his eyes to help somebody, but they did not accept his help. In fact, they turned around and they scolded at Sariputta. So you can see that helping people is not easy, and therefore it is easy to give up. So that's one extreme form. The other is the Bodhisattva ideal. On the other hand, is to help others to become free without bothering too much about oneself. It's more of a heroic act. Okay? But the two ideals are not contradictory. We shouldn't take these to be two extremes that there is a contradiction between them. They cannot really be separated. You cannot really help yourself without helping others. And you cannot really help others without helping yourself. In other words, if you don't have ability, you don't have the means to do so, then it's very difficult to help others, right? If you want to practice giving, but if you have no resources, no money to give, it's going to be very difficult. But if you want to help somebody, and you are helping somebody, that means you have the ability. So that means you already are capable. So that means you have already helped yourself. Right? So these two are not separable. We are social beings, and we should understand that social beings, by social being doesn't mean that we need to have a social life, but we live among each other and we influence each other. It is impossible to cut yourself off from other people for any length of time, even though you may cut yourself off from physical contact with them. You influence them, they influence you. If you develop emotional positivity and insight within yourself, it has its effect on others, right? If you are very positive, you will have effect on other people. But if you're always negative, you will pull other people down as well. So there is that influence upon each other. If you work for others, give to others, sacrifice yourself for them, it has its effect on you, right? If you're out there volunteering, doing great deeds to help others, it refines yourself, your altruism, your selflessness. It increases your selflessness. So therefore, when you do something, it affects you. It comes back to affect you. Of course, when you do something positive, it comes back to affect you on positively. So we cannot really separate helping ourselves from helping others. When we practice meditative meditation and we have meditative bliss within us, we have this joy within us, those people around us, our families, our friends, when they come within our presence, right, they are impacted as well. So we cannot say that a person can cultivate and achieve emancipation on his own without impacting others. The Bodhisattvas build the Buddha land because they have no alternative. If you want to evolve spiritually, you have to evolve in free association with others. So what this means is that in the process of helping others, that we don't get bogged down by the worldly matters, and we don't get trapped, but we still maintained our individuality, right? When you help somebody, it doesn't make you competitive. It doesn't make you jealous if other people are more successful. A philosopher, an author, Blake, he said, mutual forgiveness of each vice, such are the gates of paradise. So similarly, we can say mutual helpfulness in leading the spiritual life, such is the foundation of the Buddha land, right? The Buddha land, Sukhavati, is to help us to lead the spiritual life. So what do Bodhisattvas use to build Buddha land? The Buddha field or the Buddha land of Bodhisattvas is a field of living beings. In other words, a Buddha land is built with living beings, those who want to evolve to become Bodhisattvas. Hakuin, Japanese Zen masters, he said, outside of living beings, no Buddhas. No living beings, no Buddha land. So the purpose of, that's why he said no alternative here, is that the purpose of creating that Buddha land is to help sentient beings. And to become a Buddha, your purpose is to help sentient beings. So therefore, when you create that Buddha land, you are creating it to help sentient beings. And when you become a Buddha, you have no alternative but to create the Buddha land. Does it make sense? So you want to build a Buddha land, you need people. People are all that you need. So it doesn't matter you have buildings, you have money, you have resources. If you got people, you got everything, right? And it is true not only in building the Buddha land, but all levels of spiritual life. If you want to have spiritual community, you need people. If you want to have a retreat, Guoqi or Phaktak, those retreat. You want to have a class like this, you need people. We need people, and that will help to create the environment. So it's not enough to have the facilities, not enough to have teachers or speakers. You need people who want to become true individuals, who want to evolve. So when we have this vow to be in the Western Pure Land, our inner heart should be to become bodhisattvas, to become like Amitabha, and not to escape from the headaches of this world. Right? That's very important, because we are reminded that those who want to become individuals, right, who want to evolve, not to get a free ride, to avoid suffering. We want to be like the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, in our hearts should have the desire to become individuals, to evolve to the higher levels of consciousness. At the same time, we should not take this metaphor too literally. What this means is that Bodhisattva is not like a sort of a spiritual bricklayer, right? Fitting people neatly into place with the aid of a bit of compassion for cement. In other words, there's often an analogy that Buddha's vows are like a boat, that all you can do is just hop on and then you're there. So it's not like it's easy just hopping on into and then everything is taken care of. We have to put in the effort to get on the boat and to work to help out the boat, right? To keep it afloat and not to try to sink it, right? So when bodhisattvas are compassionate in helping us, it doesn't mean that we can just sit back and relax and then enjoy the ride, but we should put in the effort along the way. So a bodhisattva can build the Buddha land with people only with their cooperation. In other words, if we don't want to be there, we're not going to be there, and there will be no Buddha land. In helping to build a Buddha land, the other people are themselves aspiring bodhisattvas. Does it make sense? I think this is very important for us to keep in mind, that the reasons that we want to be in Sukhavati, Jila Sijie, Cực Thế Giới, is not to escape from suffering in this world, but to be inspired. We are aspired to become bodhisattvas. We want to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, right? It's not to escape from the suffering, because that is very negative, and that is just misleading. Because if the purpose is to go to the Western Pure Land in order to escape suffering, then when heavenly environment occurs, we will be attracted to it and not to Sukhavati. In other words, as we cultivate merits and our merits grow and life become more pleasant, we will forget about the vow, because we say that we have achieved a purpose, because the purpose is to be alleviated from suffering. And if our lives are now pleasant, then we have achieved a goal. Therefore, we will not be in the Western Pure Land. Does it make sense? I hope you take this into consideration seriously, because it's a mistake that we should avoid, is to go beyond this world because we want to avoid suffering. It should not be the primary purpose. It is true that we don't want to encounter suffering, but that is not the primary purpose. The primary purpose to be in the Western Pure Land is to become bodhisattvas, to achieve enlightenment so that we can help all sentient beings. Does it make sense? That is how we resonate with the bodhisattvas there. That's how we are preparing our mind mentally, spiritually, to be in the Western Pure Land. Otherwise, we'll be forcing ourselves, right? We heard great words about all the advertisements of the Sukhavati, the Western Pure Land, and we bought into the advertisement. But we don't know what's behind it. We only see the results. We don't see why being the purpose of being there, right? Again, the purpose of being in Sukhavati is not to escape suffering, but to be aspired to become bodhisattvas and to become like those in the Western Pure Land, to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. Does it make sense? All right. Okay. So that is how we have this joyful faith. 自心信要, 激荡的鸟. And in order to have this joyful faith and the migration to Western Pure Land, we need to live our current lives as if we are already in the Western Pure Land. In other words, the life that we're living here should not be so different from the life that we're going to have. We should try to match it as much as possible to eliminate discrepancy. Otherwise, we'll become like the fish seller in a beautiful right? Sweet smelling flower shop. We will not be used to it. We will not get used to it, and we will want to hold on onto our smelly basket. We will want to seek the distraction, the excitement, the worldly excitement, and not the meditated environment. Okay? So, in other words, when we make a vow to be en sukhavati, behind that vow should be the vow to make this world a better place, a happier place with our presence. When we leave this world, it should be a better place than the one that we were born into. So that should be our purpose, is when we leave this world should be a better place than the one that we entered. So Buddha field is a field of positive thought, a field of high resolve, right, determination, a field of virtuous application, and a field of 6 perfections, 6度, 波罗蜜, right, 六度, 巴拉嘛, and a field of 4 immeasurables, 四无量心, tứ vô lượng tâm. The 4 immeasurables of here says, the author says, friendliness, compassion, joy, and equanimity, or loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, and a field of 10 precepts. So this is a very positive environment, and if we want to be there, we have to be naturally positive, and that is the whole purpose of sitting in meditation, learning the Dharma. When we sit in meditation, we are cultivating this positivity. When we learn the Dharma, we are reinforcing that positivity. So bodhisattvas build a Buddha field to the extent that they develop themselves spiritually, to the extent that they practice the Dharma for the benefit of all beings. And they purify the Buddha field to the extent that they purify their own minds. So we have seen that Buddha land is the ideal environment for leading of spiritual life. Right? We want to be in Sukhavati because it is a more positive environment than here. But we should not make too sharp of a distinction between here and Sukhavati, because our mind will not change abruptly like that. It takes time to transitions, to make that transition. So therefore, we should live this life as if we were already in Sukhavati. We should live a life that brings happiness to those around us, and to try our best to make this world a better place than the one that we enter. The Buddha land is built by united spiritual efforts. So it's not just the Buddha creating this Buddha land and people get a free ride when they get there. But they want to be there. They aspire to be bodhisattvas. So they work jointly with other bodhisattvas to create the Buddha land. And they build it because if they want to be bodhisattvas at all, they have no choice. Right? In other words, if we care about a spiritual community, we come here, we put in our best efforts to make it a beautiful place. And if that is our aspiration, then when we come here, we have no choice but to be gravitated towards making our best efforts. Does it make sense? Right? The spiritual development of one of them involves the spiritual development of all. In other words, when we are cultivating, we're developing ourselves individually, we are developing ourselves for all the others within the spiritual community. And all the other spiritual community are developing for us. For example, last night when we had our Q&A questions, right, one person asking the questions, but the entire spiritual community was involved in answering the question. It was a beautiful setting, right? One person wanting to overcome doubts, and he had questions. The entire community contribute, offer their different perspectives to help to provide a complete picture, right? Because we can come up with our own perspective. It may not be complete, but when we put all the pieces together, it becomes a complete puzzle. So when we together and the spiritual community was trying to answer the question for one person, that was for one person. But the fact that the person asked the questions was for all the community, because everybody benefited from the different perspectives in answering the questions to help clarify. So the Bodhisattvas build the Buddha land with their own lives and by means of their individual practice of the Dharma within a context of spiritual fellowship. So spiritual community is spiritual friendship, right? We help each other. When we help somebody, we're helping ourselves. Because when we are helping somebody to overcome the difficulties, we are not only empowering them, but we are empowering ourselves too. We feel great in the opportunity to help and in our ability to help. Does it make sense? Right? So Amitabha created Sukhavati with us in mind. So when we have joyful faith, 自心信要, jitam tinyao, and we have this vow, it is only natural that we should be born there. Does it make sense? So it's not about escaping this world to avoid suffering, but to be aspired to become bodhisattvas. That is how we can maintain our momentum. Year after year of practice, if we want to maintain the momentum and not lose faith and not give up in the race, then we should have this aspiration, this burning desire to become bodhisattvas and to have this joyful faith, right? To maintain that positivity in our hearts. So then the question that we should ask ourselves is, do we want to be there? Do we want to be among the bodhisattvas? Do we want to achieve enlightenment? And then if the answer is yes, then we should increase our vow power or our willpower to overcome the karmic forces, to become individual. So when we developed our willpower, we are saying ourselves that I'm making a determination to do what I want to do. That will lead me to spiritual liberation. And that will require efforts, and that will require determination, individuality within us. So when we talk about willpower and migration to Western Pure Land, that's the future. But when we have the willpower, it can positively impact us in our current life. With willpower, in the midst of difficulties, there is hope. Right? When we have this willpower and we face difficulties, there is hope. We can find answers to our difficulties. It's just like we're in a tunnel, it's all dark, but yet we can see light at the end of the tunnel. It gives us hope that there is something that we can depend on. And we know that if we can continue to walk in the tunnel towards the light, the beautiful blue skies await. So hope here is not just some hope here is not just some mundane wish, but hope here is realistic because it's based on understanding conditionality. We recognize our potential to change for the better. That's where hope gives us the aspiration to continue. We know that we are mundane beings, right? Filled with difficulties, and you can say misfortunes. But we know that behind that conditionality, the law of cause and effect, that when we provide the right conditions, we put in the right efforts, we can achieve a better future, a better tomorrow, right? So without willpower, in the midst of difficulties, we will create more unskillful karma, more suffering for ourselves. So that's the benefit of having this willpower in the current life is that it becomes a guiding principle for us, becomes a light at the end of the tunnel for us to follow. And we know that there is a possibility for us to change for the better because of the understanding of the law of conditionality. We believe in the law of conditionality, that when we provide the efforts, put in the right efforts with the right conditions, we will achieve our goals. Does it make sense? Otherwise, without willpower, we will be a muddled state and we will not have this clarity. So what happens when we have this unclarity? When we live in delusion, we don't have clarity, don't have awareness, we will seek joy in the wrong way. In Dhammapada, Phải Chư Jing, Kinh Pháp Cú, the Buddha says, he who contaminated by his association with hatred seeks happiness for himself by inflicting suffering on others is not released from hatred. This is delusional. A person who wants to have happiness, and that's a natural search, right? To seek for happiness, it's very natural. But because in delusion that he is not seeking for happiness in the proper way, because he's using unskillful conditions to seek for joy. Does it make sense? So that's a state of delusion. He's using the wrong methods and the wrong conditions to find joy. And so when we have hope, because of the understanding of conditionality, we will have this awareness because we're providing the proper inputs and the proper conditions to achieve whatever that we're seeking, right? Another benefit is that when we have this willpower, this vow, we will continue to reinforce our vow power, and the probability of rebirth increases. Rebirth in Sukhavati increases. Right? When we continue to make a vow, continue to reinforce it, we are increasing the probability of rebirth in Sukhavati. So in Dhammapada, the Buddha says, the evildoer burns in both worlds. He burns here and he burns there. He burns with remorse, thinking he has done evil, and he burns with suffering, having gone after death to an evil state. So when a person who has done bad, he's suffering in this lifetime for feeling bad. But not only that, but he suffers in the future because of that state, that reinforcement. So same thing, the doer of good delights in both worlds, here and now. Here now and the future. He delights here and he delights there. He delights in this life, thinking he has done good, and he delights after death, having gone to a state of happiness. So when we have done something good to help others, skillful to help others, we feel happy about it. Happy for the opportunity to do skillful deeds, and happy that we can help somebody, that we feel happy. And then in the future, we will be reborn, we will have a beautiful rebirth. So these two verses here, verses 17 and 18, should help to clarify and give us the confidence in the law of cause and effect, right? Because with the proper mindset, our next rebirth will be better, right? We feel happy now, but we also feel happy later on. So with this mindset of the Pure Land, rebirth in Sukhavati is very much possible within our lifetime. We just need to provide the proper conditions, and we should believe in that. So how do we make our willpower effective? We should be earnest and pray in front of the Buddha, and not just to think about a vow, but to be sincere and be down on our knees in front of the Buddha to pray and and the prayer of vows does not disappear into thin air, but it will come to fruition one day because we are leveraging the Buddha's power, and we're not praying for personal benefits. Like we're not praying to go to Western Pure Land to avoid suffering for ourselves, but to become bodhisattvas and to gain enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. Right, so that's how we make our willpower effective. It's not just for personal or just for complete self-dependence, but we are leveraging the Buddha's powers. And we follow the law of conditionality. We put in the efforts, right, to leverage it. And the benefits of willpower gives us guiding principles. When we have willpower, we are deciding to take control of and direct our lives in the right direction, as opposed to just living moving along with the karmic forces, and to do the things that we don't want to do, but we continue to do things and to live without awareness. Then we are not changing the directions of our future. But when we make vows and we live with awareness and we maintain that willpower, we are taking control of our lives. And we're saying, no, that's not where I want to go, to be stuck in the samsara, the cycle of life and death, but I want to go to the Sukhavati because that's my willpower. In Dhammapada, the Buddha says, irrigators draw of waters, fletchers strain arrows, carpenters shape wood, and spiritually mature discipline themselves. So the irrigator who manages water is skilled in directing water to wherever place he wants, right? The fletchers is skillfully shaping a very straight arrow, shape out a piece of wood by working skillfully on it. And the carpenter selects a block of wood and constructs whatever he wants out of it, depending on his need. In the same way, the wise persons work upon their minds, restraining it the way they desire. So when we cast rise to willpower, our vow, Fa Yuan, that vow power, that willpower allows us to direct our future. We are taking control of our lives and not just to follow along, drift along our karmic forces and live in a state of murder. And the benefits is liberation from suffering of the cycle of life and death, right? And so, for example, we're making a vow to help our lives. We should have a sense of direction and purpose. That's the benefits of vow, is that it gives us a sense of direction, a sense of purpose. Okay, so let's summarize what we have just talked about. We developed vow power to overcome the karmic momentum, the karmic forces, in order to achieve spiritual liberation. Otherwise, we will just drift along and we'll continue to live how we've been living day after day and face death and then encounter next rebirth within the samsara and continue the suffering. But when we make a vow and we have this willpower, Fa Yuan, then we are taking control of our lives in a more positive directions, right? So, in other words, we should develop spiritually and mentally in a positive way, spiritual and mental positivity, by providing the seed of our joyful faith, 志心信要, 鸡蛋灯鸟, a fertile ground for that seed to grow. So, and the Buddha lands are developed for those who aspire to become bodhisattvas, not just to escape suffering in this world. Buddhas and bodhisattvas can create the Buddha lands, but they cannot force sentient beings to be there indefinitely. So sentient beings like us can only be there if we want to be there, if we have the right aspiration. And so we should develop joyful faith and vow for rebirth in Sukhavati. And in order to do that, we need to be prepared mentally and spiritually, right? We don't want to be like the fish seller looking for her smelly basket and cannot take the fragrant smells of the flowers in the flower shop. In order for us to prepare ourselves mentally and spiritually, we should live a life as if we are already in the Western Pure Land. We should live a life that brings happiness to others, meaning to others. And we should make an effort to make this life a better place than the one that we enter. This may sound very ideal, right? But it is meaningful and it is very motivating. At least it's an aspiration, a sense, a goal that we should strive to achieve, right? It may be ideal, but it is very meaningful, very aspirational. Okay, let's do merit dedication. Could you please join your palms together? We recite. May the merits and virtues accrue today adorn the Buddha Pure Lands, repay 4 types of kindness above, and aid those suffering in the paths below. May those who see and hear of this bring forth the resolve for the Bodhi mind. When this retribution body is complete, together we shall meet in the land of ultimate bliss. If you could please rise, we bow to the Buddha 3 times to show our respect. First bow, second bow, and third bow. Amida Society.